Yeah. Today we're going to talk about the Trekker Pyramid, which is a 2-layer single pole trekking pole tent. Comes in a compression bag so you can stuff it back in when you're done, and it weighs in at 2 pounds 10 ounces. That includes the bag, the stakes, and everything you need to set it up. The stakes come wrapped up in the middle of this tent. Almost all the guy lines come pre-attached, but there's one guy line that is separate, and it's right here. And that comes in your stake bag. You only need 6 stakes to set up this tent, unlike some of our other trekking pole tents that require 8 or 9. So this trekking pole tent comes with 2 layers, and the 2 layers are separate. When you unwrap the bag, you're going to find the outer layer and the inner shell. Now that I've shown you what's inside the pack, let's get started on how to set this tent up. To set this tent up, the easiest way to start is to lay out the inner tent, which is the mesh layer of the tent. So I like to zip up the door. If it came unzipped, then I like to zip it all up before I set it up. I recommend attaching the rainfly. Make sure the door is facing the same direction as the door on the mesh tent. But I recommend attaching the rainfly before you stake down the tent and set it up. And to attach the rainfly, all you do is attach the 4 corners by clipping the carabiner onto the bungee that you'll find on each of the 4 corners. It's a typical beautiful Washington day today, a little bit of a drizzle. So if you hear some water hitting the tent, that's why. It's because there's a drizzle today and the trees are raining on us as we set this up. But there's also a loop in the back that you attach to the carabiners. So attach the 4 corners and the loop in the back before you start setting this thing up. Once you have the carabiners attached in all 4 corners, you're ready to start staking the corners out. When I'm staking down the tent, I find the stake loops, and I start by staking down one side, just the 2 corners on one side. And when I'm staking it down, I don't pull it too tight. It'll tighten up as you insert the trekking pole and extend the trekking pole. So after you've staked down one side, make sure that the tent is a pretty good rectangle. If it's off to one side or the other, you're going to have some weird lines in the setup, but try to make sure it's a good rectangle shape. And again, you don't need to pull too tight as you're staking this tent out. And after you stake down the 4 corners, you'll want to grab your trekking pole, open up the door, and there's 2 ways you can set up this trekking pole tent. You can either set it up with the handle up, or if you have the rubber tip on, you can set it up with the rubber tip up. If you don't have the rubber tip, the carbide tip will rip the tent. And so make sure you either have the rubber tip or you set it up with the handle up. I'm going to set it up with the handle up. Oops, I forgot one step. There's a loop at the top of the tent, the inner tent, and you'll need to attach the carabiner that's on the inside of the outer tent to that loop, and that's what holds up the tent from inside. This is also when I attach this, to attach this guy line that came in your trekking pole, in your stake bag. This guy line, I just simply attach it by clipping it on to the carabiner with the D-ring. It is possible, if you forgot your tip, it is actually possible to set this tent up by inserting the carbide tip into the grommet that comes on this guy line. And it has a protective layer on the other side so that it won't punch a hole through the top of the tent. My preferred method is still handle up. And so I set the tent up with the handle up. I extend it to the height I want it, which maybe just a little taller than it is. And then I grab the stakes that I put in my pocket. And before I pull out the front door, I like to zip the door up. Grab your rock. Now you should have one more stake left And that is for the rear of the tent. Okay, so there's a guy line that you would have pre-attached with the carabiner to the inner tent, and stake this out and pull it tight. And when you pull it tight, it also pulls the inner tent tight. Condensation will build up on the outer layer of this tent and not on the inner layer. There's a vent up top to help with condensation and to help ventilate the tent. If you open it up and there's still some sag, in each corner there is a bungee. And you can and it's got this little push button clamp on it, and just pull the corners tighter. And as you pull the four corners tighter, it will tighten the lines up inside of the inner tent so that it isn't sagging. I'm 6'4" and I can lay down comfortably inside this tent. You can sit up comfortably. And this tent has a very large vestibule so that you can sit in here. There's quite a bit of shielding above you. And so you can sit in here even with the door open. If it's raining, you're not going to get wet inside. Because this is a single layer tent, you never have to worry about the seams leaking. All the seams are taped, and the silicone nylon fabric the ultralight fabric this is made of is very waterproof. This is the way I like to set up the tent, is all together as one piece, but there's actually 3 different configurations for this tent. This one with the inner shell and the outer shell. But if you're looking for an ultralight option, it's easy to remove the inner shell. In fact, you can remove the inner shell while it's set up just by removing the carabiners. Or you can remove the outer shell and just sleep under the stars. A lot of ultralight campers will want to camp in this tent without the inner shell, and a lot of ultralight campers will just bring the outer shell. To remove the inner shell, you can even do that. You can do it while it's still set up, and all you have to do is go around and remove the carabiners from the 4 corners. Yeah, once it's zipped up and secured, you're pretty protected from the elements inside this tent. And so I do camp this way quite a bit. Just the outer shell alone weighs in at just over 1 pound. And so it is a great super light option. This is normally a 1-person tent, but when you but you can see, you can sort of, maybe you can't in the video, but you can see how much room there is inside this tent with just the outer shell. And you can see that there's plenty of room to set up 2 sleeping pads in there. And so with just the outer shell, it's a 2-person. So if you're camping in good weather, unlike us today, it's raining slightly, but if you're camping in good weather, you don't expect rain, taking the top of this tent off is super easy. I start by just lowering the trekking pole just a little to create a little bit of a slack in the tent. And I actually, for this purpose, I actually do turn the pole upside down. And so I just remove the carabiner from the top loop, take the tip off my trekking pole, so I expose a carbide tip, and then tighten the pole back, tighten the pole back up, but not that one. That one's already at the top. Tighten the pole back up a little. And then this guy line that came attached to the peak, I attach it to the stake that I already have here. And then these are super easy tensioners. You just pull on the line to tension it. And then after you've repositioned the trekking pole, you just go around to the corners and you unattach the carabiner from the D-ring where it's attached to the tent. Because what you're going to do is you're going to stretch that stretchy string out over the stake that's in position. And go around and do this to all 4 corners real quick. And this one's also a little bit too tight. And there it is.